our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. The re-emergence of Asia is among the biggest tectonic global shifts in our time. The Asian century has long been heralded. The continent is home to 59% of the world's population, more than 47% of the global GDP. Not only is Asia growing richer as it becomes more integrated, it is coalescing as a constructive force for global governance. But as the world is facing a mixture of new challenges and geopolitics, has the Asian century indeed arrived? How much say does Asia have in the global governance system? For answers related to that, I asked Victoria Kwakwa, the World Bank Regional Vice President for East Asia and the Pacific. And here are her insights. And I'm so honored to be joined by Victoria Kwakwa, who is the World Bank Regional Vice President for East Asia and the Pacific. It's been a long time, the world is changing, but I know you are sticking to the important work, which is about carbon neutrality and sustainable development. Tell me more about how the region, East Asia and Pacific, are doing as a whole in this regard.
Sure, thank you very much. Look, I mean, we've been really encouraged that even in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen very impressive announcements by several of the countries in the region, of course, on carbon neutrality. Of course, you're aware of China's pledge and commitment to achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. Japan and Korea are looking similarly at 2050. And then we also have Indonesia, which is also thinking about scenarios for achieving carbon neutrality by 2060. Mm-hmm. And then we have both Indonesia and Philippines have both announced a moratorium on new coal-fired power plants. Indonesia to start in 2023. So these are all very impressive, and we welcome these announcements. I think what we're looking to see from the countries is that they go from the announcements and the pledges to very credible policies and strategies that will really put them on this low carbon development path to achieve the carbon neutrality objectives. For example, if you look at China, China has done very well on climate technologies and renewables. It still needs to do a little bit more to support a just transition away from coal in coal-dependent communities. And then if you look at Southeast Asia as well, they're very, they have a lot of potential for solar energy, but they are generally behind on renewables. So right. There's still a lot to be done, but these announcements are encouraging, and we anticipate that we will hear some more similar announcements in the period leading up to the Glasgow COP.
As you mentioned, Victoria, China committed to 2030 carbon peak and 2060 carbon neutrality.
Yes.
Now, there's a lot needs to be done in terms of, for example, the coal-powered power plants, and yet there are issues about how to get there, the real roadmap. We see both the largest economies in the world, also in the Asia-Pacific region, China and the United States committed to it, but none has provided yet a specific roadmap. Tell me more about, from the World Bank's perspective, how do you see, the important elements in that roadmap, if we talk about the roadmap?
Sure. Look, I think that as we said, we really welcome these announcements. It needs to go, as you have said yourself, from the announcements to the roadmaps. And I'm sure that in China, as in other countries, there's work going on. China has indicated that they will prepare a climate action plan that I would imagine would give details of some of what they're planning to do to achieve these targets, both 2030 and 2060. And so we're looking forward to see this action plan, which will provide some of the details. And details are important here, also because not only because it's an important goal, but also because it's not going to be straightforward to achieve. You know, with you need a lot of coordination across different sectors of the economy and so on. So we're looking forward to see that. I think it's also going to be really important, you know, to look at policies and investments that will facilitate that. Specifically, this is going to take a lot of private sector participation. So ideally, you need policies that will also provide incentives for the private sector to engage in this area and to also move in the right direction. It's not just the public sector that will do it. And you know, so I think that my own view is that the thinking is already going on, because I don't think China will make these announcements and just sit back. And so we look forward to seeing what is being planned. I think it's going to be really important. You know, our view, China could even look at peaking before 2030. You know, we think that this might be possible and that this might make the transition easier, arguably easier, and also smoother. And then, you know, China with all the advancements in technology, the transition away from coal is also, it will always be difficult, but it's a little easier to conceive and to plan. And then China also has to look at a just transition, as I was mentioning, in some of the most impacted coal communities, which will also mean looking at the social costs of this transition and trying to see how communities retool, retrain, and so on. But China has a lot of experience in planning, as you know. That's been the basis, or you do your very regular planning, development planning. And so there's a lot of expertise in there. So taking that and really doing a plan about how the neutrality objective will be achieved and so on is going to be really critical. So that planning, that thinking, bringing in newer technologies to make this easier, and then looking at the coal communities and how you help them in all of this. I think these are all elements that China can do very well in.
All what you said are great advice, I guess, for the planners in China when they are trying to draw up this roadmap. But at the same time, you know, the things are changing as we speak. When we talk about the climate change a few years earlier, is different from now. There is geopolitical changes. There is this huge pandemic that's impacting all aspects of our lives. And there seems to be more necessity for communication, no matter on what issues these days. And therefore, how to recover the economy, how much dampening effect the economies are still going to have as a result of the pandemic is not clear. The other thing, for example, is about the coal power plants, that the central authorities in China has made it very clear there needs to be important actions against those. But at the same time, they also notify the importance of making people employed, while at the same time providing energy. After all, that's what the resource of China could provide, coal. So how do you see these very important and complicated elements coming into being?
Yeah, look, these are tough areas to work in. They're tough for China, they're tough for all countries. Because as you rightly mentioned, there are some trade-offs, at least in the short run. You know, and so governments have to confront, to identify these trade-offs, and then to see how best to deal with them. So you've mentioned the fact that even if you want to work on the coal plants, how do you address the issue of job losses, for example? And how do you make sure that you continue to have secure access to energy and, remove some of the intermittency that comes with solar, with renewables? So all of these, I agree with you, are issues that need to be looked at and considered very carefully. I think that one thing to note is that, you see, it is also possible to create jobs, green jobs, and I think that what the global evidence shows that green jobs are available and green jobs can come into being with the right policies, as I said, right incentives for the private sector to approach, to move towards greener approaches and so on, to innovate, to create startups that promote greener jobs. So I don't think when you take away these, if I should say, brown or other, not green jobs, you totally lose out. There will be other jobs that come up. Maybe it will take some time and so on. But then the issue is really, how do you retrain people to get into newer sectors so that they can take whatever skills into newer sectors and help generate growth in those newer sectors and so on.
Absolutely.
So that's one part of it. Now, in terms of the energy access itself, the cost of renewables continues to decline as technology is becoming more available, more accessible, and so that would make renewables or cleaner energies increasingly competitive relative to coal. And then you have issues, newer technologies like battery storage that can also help you address some of the shortcomings of renewables, in the fact that there might be more variability around the availability and so on. So I think with a combination of technology, with a combination of good policies and incentives to drive investments into certain sectors, that will be consistent with a transition, it is possible. Now, none of these difficult choices are without cost, so yes, it will cost some, and you might not be able to restore all the jobs immediately. So we have to be cognizant of that, and government really needs to look at how you compensate people who will lose, and what sort of mechanisms you put in place to catch people who might fall through the cracks because of this transition. But I'm confident that with technological advancements, of which China is a big part of it, with technological advancements, it is, and then with the right policy incentives, it is possible to move in the direction that is needed. For example, in China, with the ETS system that is being put in place this year, this is really good because we welcome that very much, and it's something that is going to help put a price on carbon that will provide the right incentives, for activity to move in a way that is more carbon neutral. Currently, the price that's coming out of the ETS is about $8 per ton, which is, much lower than what scientists will say needs to happen for us to achieve the Paris objectives. And so over time, you need more incentives for the price to rise, so that it contributes in a much more substantive way, in a meaningful way. But that is something that can happen over time.
Victoria, I want to
But
report to you, I've been traveling around China a bit over the past few months, and there are enormous amount of energy that both the central and local authorities put into in terms of carbon peak and carbon neutrality planning. If you are in Beijing, you will see conferences that are taking place every day on the issue, and people are very proactive in thinking about what can I do. You know, a lot of the jobs were created as forest rangers, as ecotourism. So people are
exactly.
working on the green jobs as we speak. So what you have just said really coincides with what I see in different parts of my trip as a journalist. So congratulations, I guess, on both sides, both the policy-making side from the World Bank and advice for China, and the Chinese on-the-ground practice.
This is really the commitment of the government itself. You know, I don't think, I think the government and the people of China should take the credit for it, and we're happy to support in any way that we can. Please go ahead.
And the other thing, you are in charge of the Asia, East Asia, and the Pacific. You see a lot of vibrant economies in this region. People have been talking about this is Asia-centric. But if you take a closer look, Victoria, let's just be frank here. When it comes to the power of having a say in the international governance system, this region is still not comparable to some of the others. Well, shall I say, on the way there, but still not there. But the reality has already changed. So how do you see this divide between the real realities and the say in the international governance system? Victoria.
Yeah, thank you for this question. And, you know, I think that a lot of this happens over time with, and it's quite dependent on having robust economic standing that continues to improve over time. You know, and there you have to give it to this region. Over the last several decades, this region has done a fantastic job, an outstanding job in terms of economic performance, and has contributed. If you take the decade before the COVID crisis hit, this region contributed on average 37% to global growth. You know, so this region has been consequential. You know, if you look at where it's come from a couple of decades ago to where it is contributing, yes. So yes, its economic contribution has really been important and matters. Now, what we have to look at is the risks that are presented by the COVID, you know, because with COVID, there are risks of economic instability. The financial sector and the corporate sector are much more vulnerable. There's rising debt, or debt has risen. You also have a real risk that human capital will be eroded with school closures, with food insecurity, and increasing hunger and so on, or food deprivation. So all of these are things that need to be watched to avoid eroding human capital that will take back on the gains that this region has made on the economic front. For example, on the human capital, our estimates suggest that you know, they could lose, students in the region could lose about 0.8 years of schooling between the onset of the crisis and the end of 2021. So, and that's not insignificant. So what I'm saying is that, look, the question you posed about their role in global governance and the global governance system, yes, it's a challenge, but what happens over time will depend increasingly on the economic success of these countries. And as they become more and more successful, their voice will continue to matter, and will matter more and more. And they're coming into the global governance will become something more real. So what is important is for them to continue to work at safeguarding the economic success that they've made over the years. And then, of course, continue to raise their voices in these global fora and, over time see what happens. And I think that there is recognition that you need to give more voice to the new emerging areas of economic power, including places like East Asia. So this is something that I think will be redressed over time, but maybe not overnight, but it's something that we need to continue to focus on. And the best tool that they can have is to continue to do well on the economic front and have equitable and inclusive growth, strong economies. That in itself draws a lot of respect and attention.
Finally, before we go, how do you see, Victoria, the role of the Chinese economy and some of the indicators of the Chinese economy from the World Bank's perspective? How are you observing the Chinese economy, its status, and its future trends?
Well, look, the Chinese economy has been a very, very important part of progress in the region. And beyond that globally, and everybody knows that, it's a big part of global value chains on several products, And so for all of us in the region, as well as even globally, need the Chinese economy to continue to perform well. And so it is heartening that, we saw China be, sort of almost the first economy to really be coming out of the crisis and to be on the path of recovery and restarting production and so on, because it's not only good for China, it's good for other countries as well. So that is good. I think that China could do a bit more in terms of its efforts to continue to move away, to move more towards a consumption-based economy, and it still has a bit more room to provide fiscal stimulus in ways that support various social objectives in the country, and that will be good for China, and it will be good for the global community as well. So we believe that China could do a little bit more to help itself and to help the global economy continue to rebound and recover.
Victoria Kwakwa, World Bank Regional Vice President for East Asia and the Pacific. As always, what a pleasure. Thank you so much, ma'am.